New Orleans breathes differently at night. The heat of the day does not simply leave, it lingers. It clings to ornate ironwork on French Quarter balconies. Heavy, humid air rolls in from the Mississippi River. After the Great War, around 1919, the air felt thicker, charged with something unseen. The nights were long. Fine mist rose from the cobblestones, leaving streets slick. The atmosphere swallowed sound, making the familiar strange. Gas lamps cast a weak, flickering glow. Narrow streets painted in amber and deep shadow, the lamp's light, a fragile defense against enveloping darkness. Fog lit by lamp glow, creating silhouettes and secrets. Behind closed shutters of countless bars and parlors, a new sound spilled onto empty roads. It was jazz. Trumpets, trombones cried into the night. A chaotic pulse, the city's heartbeat. Yet even this music couldn't erase the unease. A new rhythm began to move through the city. It did not belong to jazz bands. It was quieter, more deliberate. Soft, almost silent footfalls through back alleys and dark yards. The presence was felt more than seen, a whisper traveling from one neighborhood to another on humid air. People locked doors tighter. They looked over their shoulders, peering into pockets of darkness. Something walked the streets of New Orleans. It wore night like a cloak, moving with a purpose no one understood. A fleeting shape at the edge of vision. Often seen with a wide-brimmed hat, its featureless form a stark black cutout against glowing fog. The figure glided through labyrinthine ways, a specter from the city's mysterious heart. A deep, primal fear took root. Music and warm lights might not be enough. Before he was given a name, he was simply a presence, a shift in the humid night air, a story without a character. In the sprawling, nocturnal labyrinth of New Orleans, a city that breathes stories and exhales secrets, this one began not with a bang, but with a creeping collective dread. He was a feeling, an unspoken anxiety that clung to the wrought iron balconies and seeped through the cracks of the old Creole townhouses. It was a new kind of fear, one that felt ancient and primal, yet disturbingly modern. It was the unsettling notion that the familiar sounds of the city, a distant jazz trumpet, the clatter of a streetcar, the murmur of late-night revelers, were no longer comforting. Instead, they became a fragile veil, barely concealing a terrifying silence that lay just beneath. He was the reason a dog, usually placid, would suddenly rise, hackles raised, and bark at nothing in the middle of the night, a frantic, desperate warning aimed at an empty street. He was the sudden icy chill that ran down your spine as you found yourself bolting a back door that had never been bolted before, your heart pounding with a nameless premonition. It was an instinctual act, a response to a threat you couldn't see or name but could feel with absolute certainty. The city lived in a tremor of this unnamed fear. Windows were shuttered earlier. Conversations in the corner groceries fell to whispers when a stranger entered. The vibrant, chaotic energy of the Crescent City began to curdle. It was a fear that settled over families as they tried to sleep through the thick, oppressive Louisiana nights. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of the wind in the banana leaves outside became a potential footstep, a sign of intrusion. The Axeman was not yet a legend whispered in hushed tones. He was an immediate and terrifying possibility. A phantom menace whose motives were as obscure as his identity. Was it robbery, revenge, or something far more random and therefore more frightening? He was a ghost that might choose your home next for reasons no one could fathom. The lack of a pattern was its own form of psychological torture. Rich or poor, Italian grocer or society debutante, no one felt safe. The selection seemed utterly, terrifyingly arbitrary. His arrival was announced not by a voice, not by a demand or a threat, but by the sharp, splintering sound of wood giving way. A brief, violent noise, quickly muffled by the humid night. A panel on a back door, cleanly and efficiently removed. Not kicked in, not shattered, but surgically excised. It was his signature, his calling card, an act of chilling precision that spoke of patience and purpose. He often used the family's own tools against them, turning a symbol of domestic life, an axe from the woodshed, into an instrument of horror. This was how he entered, through this dark, geometric wound in the heart of the home. Not with a crash of a clumsy burglar, but with a quiet, methodical violence that was somehow more chilling. The care he took was a testament to his composure, his absolute control of the situation. He was not in a hurry. He was an artist of terror, and this was his craft. A thin slice of pale moonlight or the faint glow of a distant street lamp would suddenly appear on the floor of a dark kitchen. It was a sliver of light where no light should be, a silent proclamation that the sanctity of the home had been breached by an intruder from the night, a geometric stain of wrongness on the familiar landscape of one's own house. The scent came next, an invasive guest mingling with the familiar, comforting smells of chicory coffee left from supper, and the sweet olive blossoms drifting in from the garden. It was a heavy, metallic odor, unmistakable, the scent of fresh blood. It crept through the hallways and under the doors into the bedrooms, a sickening perfume that announced the horror before it was even seen. It was an olfactory violation, a smell that didn't belong in a place of rest and safety. Families would be roused from their slumber not by a scream, but by this strange, coppery smell, mingling with the damp Louisiana air, a scent that would trigger a primal alarm deep within the brain. They would wake up to a house that felt suddenly wrong, altered. The familiar geography of their home had been violently remapped. The air itself felt heavier, holding a terrible secret that had just unfolded in the darkness while they slept, completely unaware, completely vulnerable. In those first disoriented moments of waking consciousness, some would see him, a fleeting glimpse through heavy, sleep-filled eyes. But they never truly saw a man. They saw an archetype of fear. They described a presence, not a person. They saw a tall silhouette standing in a doorway, often clad in dark clothes and a hat that obscured any features. They saw a large, dark shape stepping back from a bed, its work completed and melting into the deeper shadows of the room. He moved with a liquid grace that defied his size. He was a phantom who seemed to be swallowed by the very darkness that spawned him, leaving no trace but the devastation he wrought. He would disappear back out the way he came, a specter retreating into the dawn. He left behind a scene of unimaginable carnage, and a house filled with a silence more terrifying than any sound. A silence that would soon be broken by the wail of sirens, the frantic shouts of neighbors, and the click of a photographer's flashbulb, capturing the beginning of a legend that would haunt New Orleans for a century to come. The story of the Axeman is etched into the very cobblestones of New Orleans, a tale synonymous with the shadowy alleyways and jazz-filled nights of the French Quarter. But the terror, the real, visceral fear, didn't begin there. It began across the Mississippi River, in the quiet, unassuming working-class neighborhood of Gretna. A place of modest homes and hard-working families, Gretna felt a world away from the city's decadent heart. The river was more than just water. It was a psychological buffer, a moat that seemed to keep the city's more sinister elements at bay. Here, people believed they were safe. And in the heart of this community, at the corner of Upper Line and 2nd Street, Joseph and Catherine Maggio ran a small grocery store from the ground floor of their home. They were Sicilian immigrants, part of a wave of newcomers who had sought a better life in the humid embrace of Louisiana. Their days were a familiar rhythm of weighing produce, making change, and exchanging pleasantries with neighbors. They were known not for wealth or influence, but for their tireless work ethic and the quiet dignity with which they lived their lives. They were, by all accounts, ordinary people, living an ordinary life. Their nights were usually filled with the mundane, comforting sounds of a city settling down for the evening, the distant, rhythmic clatter of a streetcar on its final run, the familiar barking of a neighborhood dog, the low hum of conversations drifting from open windows. These were the sounds of safety, of normalcy. But on the night of May 22nd, 1918, as a thick fog crept in from the river, a different sound entered their home. A sound that didn't belong. It was the sound of a chisel scraping against wood, a quiet, patient, and methodical intrusion that went unheard by the sleeping couple, lost beneath the familiar symphony of the night. It was the sound of a phantom finding its way in. The axeman had arrived, and he had chosen his first victims. The next morning, as the first light of dawn struggled to pierce the heavy, humid air, Joseph's brother Andrew arrived to start his workday at the grocery. He found the front of the shop locked and quiet. The shutters were still drawn. This was unusual. Joseph was a man of routine, always the first to open. A knot of unease tightened in his stomach. He called out his brother's name, but the silence that answered was absolute. He decided to walk around to the back entrance, the path damp with morning dew. And there, he saw it. A lower panel of the kitchen door had been expertly chiseled out, leaving a dark, gaping hole that seemed to breathe the stale air from within. The removed piece of wood lay beside it on the ground, almost as if placed there with care. It was a neat, deliberate opening, just large enough for a person to crawl through. This wasn't the work of a common burglar, smashing a window in haste. This was calculated, patient.
"Joseph, Catherine!"
There was no answer. Only a heavy, unnatural silence hung in the humid morning air. A silence that felt thick, wrong, and pregnant with horror. It was in that moment Andrew noticed something else. A faint coppery smell on the air. The scent of a slaughterhouse. His heart pounding against his ribs, he squeezed through the violated doorway. Inside, the small apartment was plunged into a disquieting gloom. The air was thick, suffocating. The metallic scent he had noticed outside was overpowering now, a sickening perfume that clung to the back of his throat. He followed it, his dread mounting with every step, toward the bedroom at the back of the apartment. In the bedroom, he found his brother and sister-in-law. The scene that greeted him was a tableau from a nightmare, a vision of hell brought to earth. They had been attacked in their sleep, in the sanctity of their own bed, with a ferocity that defied all comprehension. The violence was absolute, the carnage overwhelming. Catherine was already gone. Joseph somehow was still breathing, his life fading with every ragged gasp. And there, on the floor, lay the weapon. It was an axe belonging to the Maggios themselves, taken from their own woodpile. It was now covered in blood. It rested on the floor, as if casually discarded, a gruesome testament to the intimate, unspeakable violence that had unfolded. The killer had used the victim's own tool to become their executioner. The room was a sacred space transformed into a slaughterhouse. An intruder had come and gone like a phantom, leaving behind nothing but death and a profound, chilling silence. Joseph Maggio would die minutes after being discovered. News of the Maggio murders spread through Gretna and across the river into New Orleans like a fever. The afternoon editions of the papers screamed with lurid headlines. It was the sheer brutality that shocked people most. This wasn't a crime of passion between lovers or a drunken brawl gone too far. This was something else entirely, something cold and predatory. Investigators quickly determined this was not a robbery gone wrong. The cash register in the store was untouched. Jewelry and other valuables in the apartment were left in plain sight. The motive was not greed. This was something personal, vicious, and terrifyingly random. The killer's only goal, it seemed, was the act of killing itself. The police were baffled. The crime scene offered a frustrating mix of clues and contradictions. There were no witnesses, no clear motives, no fingerprints. The killer had moved with an almost supernatural stealth, leaving behind no trace of his own identity. The only physical clues were the chiseled door panel, a signature of a craftsman's patience, and the bloody axe. But there was one more thing, something that would elevate the crime from a simple, brutal murder to the beginning of a legend. A cryptic message had been scrawled in chalk on the sidewalk near the home. It read, "Mrs. Maggio will sit up tonight just like Mrs. Tony." It was a chilling, nonsensical phrase that only deepened the mystery. Who was Mrs. Tony? The police had no record of a recent crime involving anyone by that name. Was it a taunt, a clue, or the meaningless rambling of a madman? The Axeman had made his first move. He had left his bloody signature, a cryptic riddle, and a city trembling with questions. The illusion of safety in Gretna was shattered forever, and across the river in the heart of New Orleans, people began to wonder if the dark, foggy nights were as empty as they seemed. The terror had just begun. In the weeks that followed the Maggio murders, a sickness took root in the soul of New Orleans. It wasn't a fever of the body, but of the mind. A subtle but definite change came over the city. The easygoing, almost languid rhythm of daily life, a rhythm dictated by the heat and the river, was disrupted. The city's famous laissez-faire attitude, its casual embrace of life's eccentricities, began to fray at the edges, replaced by a new current of fear. It was a fear that seeped into the very cobblestones, a miasma as thick as the fog rolling in from the Mississippi. And so, people started talking. They talked in hushed tones, leaning in close, as if the very act of speaking the killer's name aloud might summon him. They whispered over their morning coffee and chicory, on the rattling streetcars clanging their way down St. Charles Avenue, and in the long, humid queues at the French market. Every conversation, no matter how it began, seemed to circle back to the grocers in Gretna. The attack wasn't just a crime, it was a story, a dark fable taking shape in the city's collective imagination. The story was retold, embellished, dissected. Details were magnified, timelines distorted. Was the axe left at the scene? Or was it taken? Did anyone hear a scream? Or was the silence the most terrifying part? The image of the chiseled door panel, that simple, brutal act of entry, became a potent symbol of vulnerability. It was a violation not just of a home, but of the sacred belief that a locked door meant safety. If it could happen to the Maggios, a hard-working family in their own home, it could happen to anyone. The randomness was the true horror. The city was on edge, looking for shadows where there were none, its imagination painting a monster in every darkened doorway. The oppressive heat of the summer of 1918 did nothing to soothe the city's frayed nerves. It was a suffocating, relentless heat that clung to the skin like a damp shroud, making the nights long and sleep a near impossibility. In the sweltering darkness of their bedrooms, people lay awake, listening. Every creak of a floorboard settling in the humidity, every rustle of palmetto leaves outside a window, became a source of fresh alarm. The familiar sounds of a southern night were now a prelude to terror. People who had never thought twice about leaving a window open for a cooling breeze now nailed them shut, choosing to suffocate in the heat rather than risk an open invitation. The sales of new locks and bolts skyrocketed. Hardware stores couldn't keep them in stock. A sense of siege began to settle over the neighborhoods. Homes were no longer sanctuaries. They were fortresses. The enemy was invisible, silent, and could be anywhere. He was a phantom who left behind only carnage and a single, chilling calling card, a gouged-out panel in a back door. The fear was a tangible thing, as thick and heavy as the humid air that hung over the Mississippi Delta. It changed the way people moved, the way they looked at one another. Daily routines were now tinged with suspicion. A stranger walking down the street was no longer just a stranger, he was a potential threat, his face scrutinized for any hint of malice, the shape of his hat noted and filed away. Even neighbors eyed each other with a newfound wariness. The trust that binds a community together began to dissolve. Was the man who delivered the ice a bit too quiet? Did the fellow who repaired the roof look at the house for too long? Every unfamiliar face, every deviation from the norm was a potential clue. The gossip mills of the city churned, producing an endless stream of theories and accusations, each more fantastic than the last. It was the Black Hand, the Sicilian Mafia. It was a lone madman. It was a demon summoned from the swamps. The police, for their part, had nothing. They were drowning in a sea of speculation, their investigation paralyzed by the sheer volume of public fear and the complete absence of concrete evidence. They chased down leads that went nowhere, interviewing disgruntled employees, jilted lovers, and neighborhood rivals. They followed every whisper, every accusation, but the trail was cold from the start. It was as if the killer had simply materialized inside the Maggio home and vanished back into the night air. The axeman remained a ghost, his identity a complete and terrifying blank. He had no name, no face, no motive. He was a void, and the city rushed to fill that void with its deepest anxieties. In this city of sound, even the music began to change. The jazz that usually filled the nights with life and joy began to sound different. It was still there, spilling from the smoky bars of the Vieux Carré, a defiant heartbeat in the dark. But now, it seemed to have a nervous, frantic edge. It was as if the musicians were playing faster, louder, their improvisations more desperate. They were trying to build a wall of sound, a fortress of brass and percussion to keep the darkness at bay. The music was no longer just for celebration, it was becoming a kind of incantation, a desperate prayer against the silence. Because it was in the silence that the fear truly lived. In the quiet moments between songs, people would listen. Their conversations would die down, their drinks would rest untouched. They would listen for the scrape of a chisel on wood, for a single misplaced footstep in the alley, for any sign that the shadow was drawing near. The city held its breath, waiting for the other shoe to drop, wondering not if the axeman would strike again, but when and where.